Uh,
And it's funny because a couple of years ago you were talking about going to Heartland Park, uh, to do an endurance race, and just a wonder in your voice got me excited. And it was really fun because you said, I just perhaps it was a track you didn't know, but you came up to speed. I guess this was in what's his name's Mustang.
uh,
Uh,
well, I went to Heartland Park. It was actually that was when I went to go and test the a pre-production version of the Garmin Catalyst. Uh,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
and it was in
And you were
JD's Mustang. Yeah,
you were
yeah, yeah,
you were talking JD's Mustang. That's right.
yeah,
And you were
yeah.
saying how, you were getting to know the car the first day, and then the second day you just were sort of reveling in it. And over and above the benefit of outside influences like the Catalyst and all these tools that we use, it was just sort of fun to listen to you just sit back and say how much you enjoyed driving. And that was really fun.
So I did two champ car races this year, one at Mid Ohio, one at VAR, and it's fun to go and do those races now. And I mean, as you know, you get in the car now, and after all these years of coaching, you hear your coaching voice, coaching yourself. And man, I wish I'd had that coaching voice in my ear the way I do now, you know, decades ago. That would have been pretty no, no regrets.
No, no, no. I mean, I laugh because it's absolutely true. I feel I feel like I'm driving as well as I ever have. Maybe even better. I'm certainly driving much smarter. I continue to get quicker. I'm able to coach myself effectively in the car. And this is sort of strange for me because I raced 26 times a year for several years. Then I backed off, and backing off for me was 15 to 18 races a year. And I raced, you know, at least a dozen times a year all the way up to about 10 years ago. And then that's when the coaching business went really crazy, and I didn't have time for it anymore.
Yeah.
And I got an odd race in here or there, but it was really not, uh, it wasn't, it wasn't any more than going through the motions. And it wasn't unsatisfying. It just wasn't, I wasn't full of elation. It wasn't, um, how do I say this without, I hadn't plateaued. It's just that I didn't feel as though the fun and the charge and the joy that I used to get dancing with the car was still there, even though I was dancing with the car. And when this new car came along, I had absolutely no expectations. That was part of
Yeah.
the, that was absolutely the fundamental ingredient in having fun was I had no expectations. I wanted to buy this car, go through the car, build the car, put my hands on the car, get to know the car, and do Lime Rock one more time. Not a swan song thing, but I just wanted to go run with friends, and I had no idea where I was going to be. No idea. And all of a sudden, it was sort of take a deep breath, sit back, and the car's doing great.
So if you'd gone to Lime Rock and take you out of the picture for a moment, but your car that you had just purchased, this Fiat X19, which is way cool car, uh, uh, if you just because of where it ranked amongst the cars you're racing against, if you'd finished 12th, would you have had the same feeling? Like part of it seems like I remember, kind of seeing you like going, wow, you kicked butt and you won and you were running at the front and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, how much of it was the result? And how much of it was in there? I don't know.
No, I think you're right, and it would be disingenuous for me to say that that wasn't a big part of it.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're
and
competitive.
I
So
think I think when we strive for excellence, we are by necessity competitive. And that's a good thing because it keeps you pushing forward. Um, it's fun.
So yeah, but I'm more competitive than you are because I got to out competitive you
Well,
in the competition of being the most competitive. I want to beat you.
that's right.
But going back, I mean, I was thinking as you were talking about the number of races you were doing for a bunch of years, and then taking that time where you weren't. Um, it kind of reminded me of there was a point in my career where it was about the career, and it was about moving up, and it was about the next thing. And I often tell the story about when I was driving Indy cars for Dale Coyne Racing, and it was uncompetitive. We had, that was the days when chassis were brand new every year, and we were running like a 2 or 3 year old chassis and a couple of generation old engine. But I got to a point in 94, it was when, the whole thing of, well, I'm going to show somebody and Roger Pinsky's going to give me a call and I'm going to get that big break. Reality kind of set in that I wasn't going to make that kind of an impression in what I was driving and the way I was driving. And I stopped trying, and I started thinking, like, my mindset became not went from I got to do this to get to the next level. It changed to, you know what? I've dreamt about driving Indy cars my entire life, and now I'm doing that. Just enjoy it. And the funny thing is that last part of the season where I didn't do all the races, but I drove better. And um, I got to say, there were many points in my career where it was like, well, this is what I have to do. This is what I do, kind of thing. And now when I go and get into a car, it's not what I do. It's what I'm doing that weekend to have some fun. So it's interesting how that's. I think you and I have both sort of had this similar kind of experience, and now we're at that point. I don't want us to be like somebody going, "Oh yeah, those two old guys. Now they're having fun." But I think we are. We're the two old guys having fun, and that's cool. I don't know.
Well, it is cool. It is cool. I mean, you sign off all the time, you know, have fun.
Yeah,
And I sometimes it's not that I believe that those are just words. I believe that's an important concept, but to have it actually come true
yeah.
and really have this odd feeling of elation driving the car after each and every weekend. I kept saying, I kept waiting for the shoe to drop. Like I wasn't, I wasn't having fun. I was waiting not to have fun, and it never happened. You know,
Right.
I, I raced 4 times in 3 months. I won 10 races. Um, you know, 6 times. I ran and was able to win overall, then 4 times or twice with the group, and then twice by myself. And I kept waiting for the shoe to drop, and it never dropped. And you and I feel, I think we both share the idea that we have nothing to prove. We've had the ability to do what we want to do when we want to do it, by and large.
But I would
But
say that there was a time where I felt that I had something to prove. And I think,
yeah,
I guess I questioned you is, did you not feel that same way? There was a point there where, one of the things as a coach is, well, you're supposed to be good, right? And so I've gone through a period where I will admit now that I was like, I didn't drive as well as I could have because I was too afraid of what could happen or what I would look like, which is silly. Think about it because it's the stuff that I coach drivers to not worry about. So, yeah,
right. But yet you were able to successfully jettison that. I mean, that was what was interesting. I mean, you reached
yeah.
a comfort level that allowed you to be able to say, you know what? I'm not worried about what I look like or about what I'm doing or how fast I'm going. I'm just going to have fun. And guess what? Not only did you have fun, you went quickly.
Yeah, I got to say that that happened. So I did these two champ car races this year, as you know, and I had not done a champ car race for it had to be at least, I don't know, 10 years or something. I did a race at Road Atlanta when they were called Chump Car with Colin and Jeff Brown in their Miata. And, it was fun, but I will say the, the level of car prep, the level of driving that was there 10 years ago, uh, didn't make me want to go back again. I'm not going to say that I didn't want to, but it was like, you know,
It
it
wasn't
had to be.
compelling.
No, exactly. And, and then my good friends who are running a super well prepared Miata were going to mid Ohio. I just happened to be doing some work in Ohio. It's like, well, why not just stay over 2 more nights in a hotel room and go and do this? And I was blown away by how much chump car slash champ car has changed. Um, the level of car prep, the level of driving is nowhere even closely the way it was in the past. So that was it was fun. Now I I haven't I don't think I told you this, but um and I kind of want to be careful saying this because I don't want somebody taking it the wrong way. Not that anybody's going to hear this, but um after the weekend, Robin, I'm talking and she's like, how was it? And I go, well, I felt like I was clubbing baby seals. Um, because you
That's a
know,
Bobby Rahal quote. That's a very famous Bobby Rahal quote when he went and started with Zach Brown and Peter Stoneberg, the legends of motorsports in vintage. Bobby brought many of his interesting older cars, particularly a Chevron B16, to Birmingham. And somebody stuffed a microphone in his mouth, and he said, vintage racing is like clubbing baby seals. And
and
I think
there's a
that I, th
yeah,
I think it's legitimate to feel that way, though. I
it,
do.
there is a part of me, and yet and I don't mean that again in a bad way. There's just drivers in these races who are much less experienced, and but they're working at it and they're getting better and they're having fun, right? So that's awesome. You mentioned that you feel like you're driving as well or better than ever. I feel like that in a way myself, in that I had a friend not to like after the VIR weekend saying, how do you think you drive compared to what you used to drive? And I went, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm a 9.8. And like compared to when I was racing professionally. And I said, in some ways, I'm a 10.5 because as you say, I'm a lot smarter and I'm a lot quicker at correcting my own mistakes and I think better and I strategize better, all that kind of stuff. The only place that not the main place that I lack now is if it's one of those situations where it's a really fast section or something like that, where when I was 20 and 30 years old, it's like my life depends on this. Flat it. And now it's like, you know what? I don't care if I lose half a tenth of a second here or a tenth of a second because I've got nothing to prove and I'm okay with it. And so that's about the only place that I feel like I'm kind of lacking. And I'm going to say the most interesting part is I did 2 races this year and I don't feel rusty.
That's cool.
And
That's really good.
the only explanation I have for that is the fact that, like you, every day you get up in the morning, you think about driving and you think about it, you write about it, you talk about it, you live it every single day. Whereas, even when I was racing professionally, I'd get up in the morning and most of that day was spent thinking about sponsors and funding and, all that other stuff. And it was only, kind of at the end of the day, you go, oh, great, I get to think about driving again. And now it's all I do. So um, maybe that's a good thing.
Oh, I think that is a good thing, and I think that is again another fundamental reason why you're driving as well as you are, and why I feel like I'm driving as well as I am. Everything in the car has slowed down, even though I'm racing in a very competitive group, somewhat even more competitive uh, than what I've been doing. So I had a situation where I'm going from a fairly quick vintage sports prototype to a relatively slow, in the general scheme of things, small bore production car. And one of the things that was interesting that someone pointed out was how how can you have as much fun going 104 around Lime Rock when you have been at 53 seconds?
Hmm.
And I said it's all relative. It's
Yeah.
all the same. I'm still moving the car around just as much as I did before. I'm doing exactly the same things. I have a little more time to think, but the issue is that I'm doing exactly the same thing, and it is immensely satisfying to me to drive a slow car fast. And I forgot how much fun it is to drive a slow car fast.
Well, yes, we've talked a lot about that, right? Um, and to the point where we often see people driving fast cars, not so fast, and think, man, if only they step back and got into something lesser, and they would go better. They would learn more. Uh, so what's it like driving the X19? Like, what does it do well? How does it feel? I mean, I'm just it's a car that I look at and I go, that is just such a cool looking car. I'd like to drive it. So what's it like?
Well, I think you do need to drive it, and I think we need to make arrangements for you to come to one of these historic races and definitely share an enduro with me, or get some sessions in.
That'd be fun.
Um, you know, I think some of the reason why I feel good and some of the reasons why I'm driving better is because I'm actually physically connected to the car better. For years and years, with the purpose-built sports racing car, I hired my old shop to look after it. They did all the wrenching on it. They did all of the work on it, and I just arrived and drove. I mean, I'm sitting under a big tent, and everybody's bustling around, and everything is done, and I just get dressed and look like the hero driver standing in front of the car, and mostly talking to people that are coming by to visit and talk and ask questions, and I just get in the car and drive it, and I felt halfway after a little while that way. I was in the car, but I wasn't really connected to the car. And yes, I was moving the car around, everything was good, but my acquaintance with the X19, and I almost slipped there because I said 850 Spider, which is the first car I ever was able to buy with my own money. I drove a lot of other people's cars before I ever owned my own race car. And I bought a Fiat 850 Spider, and I started racing on my own in my own car in 1989, after racing other people's cars for 3 or 4 years before that. Um, but the 850 was really good because it taught me conservation of momentum, all of that. It was a hoot to drive in the wet. And the first time I met Dorsey Schrader, Dorsey said, "That was my first race car."
Really?
He said, "I loved it. I
Huh.
miss it." And I'm like, wait a minute, dude. You, the V8 Trans Am man, and
Yeah.
you're telling me you love that car? He said, "I love that car. I still love that car." And I was like, okay. So when I was looking around
Just
for
to
something,
interrupt for a second, Dorsey also raced Spec Racer Fords, right?
yes, he did.
Another momentum car, which, again, it goes back to the things we always talk about is doesn't matter how much horsepower you've got, you're still driving a momentum car,
That's right.
which I'm sure is one of the reasons why Dorsey was so great in Trans Am because he carried momentum. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah,
carry on.
he did. No, you're right. He rolled speed. So the thing that was very strange for me was, I felt like I'd done all I could do with the sports racing car, and I wanted something familiar, which was a Fiat, because my first professional job as a mechanic was at a Fiat dealership. And I was very familiar with the way the cars were put together. And I also knew that the cars were absolutely bulletproof if you were very careful in your assembly and did a few straightforward, simple things. The Carroll Smith trio of books, if
Hmm.
you followed that, you would have a dependable, reliable race car. It didn't matter what it was. And so my acquaintance with the X19 started 4 months before I ever raced it. I brought it home. I treated it like a little Fabergé egg. I walked around it for 2 or 3 days before I touched it because I just wanted to sort of take it in and say, okay, where are we and where do we want to go with this thing? And I I said, I don't want to go crazy. Um, but I'm going to replace the electrical system and I'm going to replace the plumbing and I'm going to put modern safety equipment in it and a new fuel cell. And I'm going to make sure everything is bolted together, wheel bearings all the best they can be, all rotating assemblies the best they can be, all new rubber in the brake hydraulic systems. But I'm not going to do anything with the motor. You know, I bought this thing cheap. Every day is a blessing. If it quits, I'll deal with it when that happens.
Yeah.
So that was where some of my trepidation waiting for the other shoe to drop. Anyway, I worked 3 months, 4 months on it. I ran out of time. I stuck the car in a trailer, drove 700 miles to Lime Rock, not having turned a lap after the brand new transmission that was on the ground a week before I left leapt into the car. And I got to Lime Rock. I rolled the car out. Lynn was with me. I go out onto the track, absolutely not knowing what to expect. And 3 laps in, I'm laughing maniacally in my helmet. I'm like, oh my God.
Mm.
And Simon Kirkby and Skip Barber had called me up and they said, hey, we need to know what you think you're going to do lap time wise in order to class you properly in this 280 car entry vintage event that we have every year on Labor Day. And I said, well, it should be quicker than an Alfa Giulietta, but probably not as quick as a Lotus 7 or a Ginetta. So I'm going to say 10, high 105, low 106. Well, the second test day session, I did three 104.2s within half a hundredth.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, the car is really, really good. It actually drives like my sports racing car. There is no understeer. It's not so happy in the back that I'm worried about it, but it definitely moves around. It's extremely responsive. The mid-engine aspect of it, if the car gets out of shape, it snaps back. It
Mm.
it it if I'm not brutal with it, if I don't just dump the throttle out, the thing just hunkers right back down and says, "Okay, you don't do that again." It's talking to me. And so I went out and I'm looking at the predictive lap timing during qualifying, and I said, I don't want to go too fast, otherwise they're going to push me into some stratospheric group, and I'm going to run with the 240Zs and the Corvettes.
Right.
And so we were able to do that and qualified outside pole, and then finished, I guess, qualified third after the second qualifying because a couple guys went quicker. And I was with people. So you do this and I do this, and every good racer should do this. Every good racer should have tremendous intelligence on every racer they expect to race with.
Hmm.
They should know how fast that person has ever gone. They should go back over Race Monitor or Race Hero or, you know, the timing and scoring system that AMB puts out, Speed Hive, and look up the people that are entered and say, where are you gonna be in the pile? And I went up there thinking, hey man, I would really like to be in the top 10. If I better than that, I'd like to be in the top 5. But none of this delusions of grandeur stuff that I'm going to go and win. I don't have enough information. It would be irresponsible for me to say that as a good racer. So after qualifying, I'm with the people I just wanted to keep in sight. And I'm like walking around the paddock on air. And everybody's walking up to me like, why are you smiling like a lunatic? And I said, because I'm in a great place.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, I did what I wanted to do. I came up here, I proved I could do it. The car's running perfectly. I have no mechanical issues. I love this track. This is still my favorite track of all time. Everybody said, "What? Lime Rock? Your favorite track?" I said, "Hey, it's hard to go fast. It's really hard to go really fast here." So that's the supreme challenge for me. That's why I'm here. Not to race these other guys, to race me.
Hmm.
And when I got in the car, it was so peaceful and so calm. And I felt like I had all the time in the world. And first race start, I muffed the shift from third to fourth. A couple guys got by. I said, okay, put my head down, focused forward, and drove around the inside of one guy through Big Ben, the outside of another guy through the left-hander, the inside of another guy in uh, turn four going on to no name. And I was in the lead. And I just controlled the race thereafter. Actually, I didn't do a good job in the first race because I said I'm just going to go as quickly as I can. So I stretched it out and we had, I don't know, 18-second margin of victory. And then I had a bunch of people come up to me after the race said, "Congratulations, but don't stink up the show."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." So then the race in the afternoon, it was a lot closer. The guys got a little quicker, I got a little quicker. And then the same thing happened on Monday morning and then Monday afternoon. So it's just so much fun, you know. It's really, really cool. But the car is a fabulous little car, and I feel like I'm bonding with it. I feel like I'm bonding with it, and I feel like it's going to be a good car for me. And I have a list a mile long of stuff I want to do to it, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
another fun thing, you
Because it's
know.
a car.
That's right, because
Yeah.
it's a car.
So
And
I,
it can always be better. It can
yeah,
always be better, you
the,
know.
I think there's something there in the having touched it yourself. And I know that that's not the case for everybody. There are some drivers who they don't want to touch the car, and there are others who have to. And then, I'm going to say that I'm somewhere in the middle. I know that mechanical abilities, I'm the weak link in the chain. But there are certain parts of it that I like to work on. And, my Lotus Elan, non-race car, but I have a blast driving it. And part of it is I tinker on it, I do some stuff to it, and then I take it out for a drive and go. I mean, first of all, talk about connecting with a car. That car, you cannot help but connect with it. But the fact that I've done that to the car and now we're driving together, it's magical. Yeah.
It's
Um,
special. It is.
yeah, yeah. I've actually got it right now. Just a few days ago, I did my annual December thing, put it up in the air, and been crawling around underneath it and making my list, and ordered a couple of parts and going, okay, that's my winter project. And but I know we're off course from the track here a little bit, or off track, no pun intended. Um, it's a car that I made a promise to myself when I bought it. Is it's a driver. It's not a show car. It's not a project car. It's a driver, and I make a point of driving it every single month of the year. In the Northwest, you're gonna have some cold, maybe even wet days. Um, but I've had it. I missed 1 month when I was in the middle of a project, waiting on parts, and just physically could not get it out. But yeah, I've had it for over 3 years now and driven it every single month. So, anyways, that's I'm in the process right now of I will be spending the next couple of weeks, and then in January it'll be back on the road again, and we'll plan some more trips in it. And man, it's so cool. It is just you can be driving on a straight country road, not an interstate, but a country road. Even if it's straight, you just like the steering is so centered, and responsive that you're just barely touching it. And then you get to a couple little sweeping corners, and it's just a tiny little bit of input. And then you get to some really twisty stuff, and you work a little harder. But it the steering in an Elan is incredible. I mean, Gordon Murray, the great designer of the McLaren F1 and his own whatever he's calling this thing now.
The T50, yeah, sure.
Yeah. He said a number of times, he says, my only regret, like with the McLaren that he designed, was I couldn't make the steering as good as a Lotus Elan. And he owns two Lotus Elans. So he knows what he's talking about. And until you drive one of them, there's no way to fully appreciate it. There's just it's what connects you, right? So yeah, I'm having a blast driving the Lotus on the road, respectfully. But part of it is the fact that, yeah, I've laid my hands on it and I've done some things to it, and that's I guess a sense of satisfaction as well as knowing what it should do and what it shouldn't do.
Yeah. That's great. That's a really good
Yeah,
story.
yeah, and then like driving this Miata this year, driving these two things. One of the things that I've not driven the same car in twice in any short period of time. Probably in at least 15 years. Like every car I get into is different and new, and whether it's some of the stuff that I tested for road and track, or um, you know, going to the Nürburgring and Spa, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take somebody on a taxi ride around the ring, and it's like, what am I driving this time? And you got to perform, right? So it's I'm going to say that's another thing that has changed in my driving. Actually, is I've gotten better at adapting quicker, and I don't think I was bad in the past, but I think just the nature of what I do now, there's no time to kind of go, well, let's take half a day to learn this car, or even half a dozen laps. No, we need to go now. I think I told you that VIR Champ Car race started like next to last or something like that, like 20 something or other, and nobody had driven VIR North Course. Well, I guess people who knew North Course had, but some of the field had never done it, and there was no practice session. So the first lap was behind the pace car, and uh, I had never driven that section up the North Course, um, and yet, like just green flag falls, and I think it was fourth lap. I'm in the lead overall, and and it wasn't because I was anything special or the car was anything special. It's just we learned how to adapt quicker than others did, I think.
Yep.
And then maybe we were just a little stupider and crazier because when the green flag flew, it was 29 degrees, I think. So
Woo.
a bit cool. Um,
A bit
anyways,
cool for sure.
uh, that to me still is. I would rather drive a new to me car, than get into the same car over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because I love the challenge of learning a new car and going,
Yeah.
what happens if I do this with the steering wheel? What happens if I do this with the brake release? What happens if I do this with the throttle? What happens if I that to me is just so much fun. And then it's like, taking that and kind of honing in, like getting closer and closer and closer. And then when you get to, like you talked about, doing a few laps in a row that are within tenths or hundredths of a second, you're going, you know what? I'm getting pretty close to it. Uh,
That's right. That's right. But you're right. The challenge of driving a different car is really helpful to me because it's a myth buster for me.
hmm,
Because a lot of people come up and they say, well, if it's set up this way, it's going to behave this way, or something like that. And I say, wait a minute, let's not prejudge. Let's figure out what's going to work and what doesn't work. I mean, it's kind of fun.
It reminds me of a conversation we had not too long ago about somebody giving the advice of you always apply the throttle at the apex of a corner. Wow, that is about the wackiest bit of advice I've ever heard in my life. All corners, apply the throttle at the apex.
No.
Nope. But yeah, but there are corners. We've had many discussions about the whole coasting thing or the hesitating, or the gap between coming off the brake and going to throttle. And there are cars that if you don't have a certain amount of coast or hesitation to allow the car to finish rotating, you're just going to be late getting back to full throttle.
That's right.
And then there are other cars where, man, if there should be no gap between brake release and apply initial application of the throttle. So, um, man, if every car was the same, we wouldn't be doing this, right?
It would be boring. It
It would
would.
be,
We would lose our passion for it very quickly,
we'd be
for sure.
playing golf or something.
Well, it's a little different. The my voyage with the X19 has been interesting though, because I don't really know. I mean, I know about the platform and I know about platforms like that. I mean, I've driven big, very high horsepower mid-engine GT cars and really enjoyed that. But to make this thing perform, you really have to sort of dig down deep. And the thing that shocked me a little bit was I I won I was fortunate enough to win all those races, the four races in the first weekend. And I was saying, you know what, everything else moving forward is probably not going to be this good, so you better revel in it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then the next time I went out in a mixed group that included 240Zs and 2.5 liter 911s and a bunch of other stuff. And I finished fifth overall, first in that group, a couple of cars in front of the rest of the crowd. And I was like, wow, I'm adapting. I'm getting better at driving this car closer to the limit consistently. And then I made a couple small changes to the car, basically adjustments, ignition timing and some carburation stuff, and took it to Summit Point. And before each weekend, before at Lime Rock, I didn't know what I'd do, so I had no lap time expectation. I went to VIR, I had no lap time expectation. I went to Summit Point for the third race, and I was like, well, I'd really like to break 130 at Summit Point. Well, I ended up doing a 27.2, and got pole by 3 seconds over the rest of my group with a 28.2. And so I'm scratching my head going, what's different about this? I'm not going to change anything. I'm going to go to Rolling Road. So I go to Rolling Road and I'm on pole again. So the car was, I said I'd like to break 125. Well, I qualified at 23.7. And 23.7 in a little car with 100 treadwear tires, that's 50 years old with 1500 cc's. I'm pretty happy with that. And the thing that was just amazing to me was I keep getting quicker and I haven't really changed any other aspects of the car. So now you talked at the very beginning of our conversation about how we are driving as well as we ever have because of the benefit of having to articulate to others all the collected wisdom that we have accumulated talking to everyone else and our own experience. And it just feels like I have a superpower in the car now.
Yeah.
Um, it's Lynn saying puke, 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 puke. So she's about had it with
Well,
the big helmet thing. So
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I could sit here and go, "Oh, okay, Peter, well, come on, geez, you're just really good at buying a good car and it's just fast." But obviously you're it's one thing to have a fast car, but it's another to be able to pull out what it's capable of doing. Um, if I'm curious, like, because having driven this Miata in a couple of champ car races, I'm kind of, there's a couple things I'm kind of like, well, if I ever drive that car again, this is what I'm going to work on with my driving. Is there something right now that's kind of like the next time on track, I know I need to do work on this?
Absolutely. You know, I think that um, we now have the benefit of obviously data. So what I do is I accumulate the data and I look at the data, and I don't look at it between sessions, but I do look at it each day, and I compare it to some other folks who I respect driving, believe it or not, spec Miatas, which is, roughly what this thing is capable of doing. And I'm realizing in some areas that I am wanting. I really have a performance deficit in a few particular areas. And I have questions about that while I'm driving, but then the data confirms it. I just look at the data to validate what I am feeling, which I think is the right way to use data. And the biggest area that I'm having trouble with is braking. And it's funny because braking is something that everybody asks me about, and I'm fairly strident about the idea that braking is the last great frontier. Everybody can keep their foot on the floor. Everybody has a comfort level going around a particular corner. And generally, if people have a modicum of competence, they do okay with both of those things. What they don't do well, and what every driver can do better, even in those at the highest level, is that EOB,
Yeah.
is this blending of the end of braking into sustained cornering. And that's where I'm working at now. Now I've run into a little bit of a jam, and this is what's kind of fun about having more than a passing knowledge of vehicle dynamics and how the car works, and how the setup of the car and the equipment on the car affects the ability of the car to do what I am asking it to do. It has larger brakes on the front. I know it has larger brakes on the rear. I discovered, talking to other people after my last race of the year last weekend with it, that the reason I was locking rears, and because the car is so nervous at corner entry that I can't really effectively trail brake,
Mm.
is because somebody put 48 millimeter piston front brake calipers on the rear. They happen to bolt up
Ah.
instead of 34 millimeter pistons in the rear. So I'm sitting on the phone with a guy who drives a car similar to this, who finished fourth at the runoffs at Road America this year in age production, Matt Brannon. And Matt said, "You have front brakes on the rear? No wonder you don't have any confidence. No wonder that our engine RPM goes to zero when you hit the brakes really hard
Yeah.
going into turn one at VIR. No wonder you have smoke pouring off the back tires." So now what's happening is, yes, there are things that I want to work on, but now I'm saying there are some basic things that I can do to the car that will help me do what I want to work on. So
A
it's
cheap fix. Just turn the
what's
brake
that?
pads around backwards. So they're
Well, I was thinking of actually taking the hammer and pinching off the
oh, there you go.
metal brake line.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tell we both think like we did when had no money doing this stuff.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's
So
it's ingrained
I gotta tell
for
you,
me.
you mentioned in the braking EOB and that. I gotta tell you, here's what happened to me at VIR. I'm 20 minutes into my stint, which is aiming to be a 2 hour stint, and I'm about 20 minutes in, and I keep going through turn four, going, you know what? I haven't got it right. Like I can't get the car to work the way I want. And because it was early in the morning and whether the light was reflecting off the track, there just so happens there was sort of like a almost like a bright patch on the pavement that was about the BOB, beginner braking. And so I'm coming up, and our eyes are attracted to bright, shiny objects, I guess. So I kept looking at it, and I kept looking at it, and I kept looking at it. And finally I went, dude, what do you talk about 9 hours a day? Look at the end of breaking point. So I shifted my eyes into the end of breaking point, that apex curbing in there. Man, the car did magic. And
Yep.
so, that was like a big, well, duh, you stupid dummy, you know, take your own advice. And yet, it. So when I'm, the next time I go coaching and I remind somebody, look for the end of breaking point, I understand better. I'm more empathetic to them
You can
because,
relate. You
yeah,
can relate.
because, you know, hey, if somebody who talks about it all day long needs to be reminded of it every now and then, so does everybody else. So, but
That's right. That's right.
it was a big aha moment for me of, hey, don't forget the basics.
That's right. Well, the other aha moment I had in this whole process of getting back up to speed was always asking for more. You
Yeah,
talk about 3%, you talk about other stuff. And honestly, 90% of the people that I work with at the racetrack think that they're asking more, but they aren't.
yeah.
Now, I can prove that with a lot of different ways, but I'm not here to disprove what they believe. I'm here to help them craft a new way forward that will allow them to transcend what they think is possible. So I had to do that with myself. I realized that if the car was too composed coming off the corner, I wasn't being aggressive enough with the throttle soon
Yeah.
enough. The car was tracking perfectly through and off the corner, and I said, it's not finishing turning quickly enough.
Mm.
And so what I did was through a succession of races, gradually and incrementally, so that I didn't spin or do anything else. I mean, this is the other thing that's wrong with the car. The car has 550-pound rear springs, which is about 200 pounds more than it should. Um, it has no sway bars, so it uses the high spring rates to control the roll rate and limit it to a maximum of 1.5 degrees. And that's all well and good, but I need something a little less than what I got now because it's too lively going in and it's too lively coming out.
Mm.
But I wouldn't have known that it was too lively coming out unless I had asked for more.
Well, your job is
And what I
find the weakness, right?
That's it. That's it. And I think so many of the people that I talk to, I assume they are pushing hard enough to find the weakness.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, you and I have talked about this before. There was a lecture that Ross Braun held at an MSA event in the UK. And somebody asked him, they said, what's your debrief with your Grand Prix drivers with Jenson Button in 2009? And he said, what is the single thing? He said, I asked him one question. What is the single thing keeping you from going quicker?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I thought about that while I was driving this car. And I said, what is the single thing that is, well, first off, I have a low top speed at the end of the longest straight. Well, let's get off the last corner a little stronger. So I started picking up the throttle sooner and I started specifically getting to wide open throttle sooner. And finally I said, let's provoke the car to finish turning by really romping on the throttle to finish that rotation. And the car came alive. It was
Hmm.
crazy. It
Yeah.
was nuts. I was like, holy Moses, I didn't know this thing could do that,
Yeah.
and it was like, it was like the beams shining down from above going, wow, not just a light bulb, infusion of power that I had never felt before. I am in control of my destiny, and this is how I do it. So it was really cool.
uh, Similarly, the one of the things, I've done this from first day I ever drove a race car was, you get out of the car and there is the question of what's the one thing you want the car to do better or whatever to make you go faster. But I always ask that same thing of myself. What is the one thing that I could do better? And one of the things that I was happy about in doing these champ car races where, like I said, aiming for 2 hours, we never quite got there fuel mileage wise, but uh, you
That's a
know,
long time between bathroom breaks too,
yeah, yeah. There is there was a point where, um, yeah, there's a point in long races, as you know, that you get out there and it's easy to kind of go, that's good enough.
Hmm.
Well, I felt like that entire stint, every lap, I was telling myself, that's not good enough. Keep pushing. And, to me, there's sort of a yes, tires go off, but the car also is getting lighter on fuel. And so if you're not going faster, unless the tires are going off faster than the benefit of the lighter weight, then you should be getting faster every single lap. And, I think, I turned my quickest laps within the last half dozen laps in a stint, right? And
Hmm.
so that was one of the things that, uh, you know, I, I can sit back now and go, there have been times in endurance races where towards the end of a stint where you're tired, you're thirsty, and you're going, no, that's good enough. No, it's not good enough. There's more. So that was, I guess that was a fun part of it for me, was doing that stint like that. Um, the other part for me is, and for me racing, I don't care if I'm the slowest car on the track. I just want to be in front of you. And, and again, I joked at the beginning about the competitiveness and everything. Like you pointed out, it's the competitiveness within me and or us. And it's uh, when I say, I just want to be in front of you, that just like if I'm in front of you, even more so if I'm driving a car that's slower, that just means I strategize better. I
That you
outthought
did a
you.
better job. You did a
Yeah,
better job.
yeah. And I love the racecraft part. That there's parts where you just like, you know, you see a car a lap beforehand and you're like, you're getting a little closer, you're getting a little closer, you're getting a little closer. And then you're looking at other traffic around and you're kind of like mapping it out beforehand. You're going, they're going to get slowed up in that corner, which is going to give me a run down here, and I'm going to catch them down here. And you planned all that out, and whoop, it happens like that. And it's like,
It's
wow,
spectacular.
it feels so good.
It really does. And that I think was the greatest pleasure that I had the whole fall. All four races was that strategizing.
And part of it is you have to have the car that's going to work with you. If you're hanging on for dear life to the car, that's tough to do. Um, or it's even more satisfying when you do get it right. But when you've got a car that's working with you and you're working with it, yeah, that's when the magic really happens. Yeah.
Well, and I didn't I guess before in my history, I've had isolated, as Bruce McGinnis says, I've had isolated moments of brilliance. I
Yeah.
think many drivers do,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we tend to latch on to those and remember them. And that's a good thing because we need to know when that happens because that's when it's right.
And it gives you a model that you're aiming for. Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. But when it becomes, for me, this fall in this car, those moments became chronic. Those moments, those moments were sustained,
Yeah.
not for a corner or a corner complex, not for a lap, but for the entire race. I was on, I felt like I was on a different level. And I felt like I had all the time in the world to make stuff happen.
Hmm.
which meant that I never felt like I had to make a lunge. I never had to weigh the risk overtly of someone coming down on me or me sticking my nose in and not being able to get out. I had no drama. Yet the car was going really quick and I felt in complete control. And that's something I haven't felt as in a sustained way almost ever in 35, 40 years of doing this.
So is that the joy?
Yes.
Is that the joy of racing for you? I mean, obviously it's a little different for everybody, but is it that what? Yeah, Eh, what triggers it? Uh,
Well, I mean, everything that you've ever talked about triggers it, trigger words
mm,
help me.
yeah,
Bringing myself to a state of mind that allows me to dispassionately, without emotion, assess what's going on. Um, Comfort, confidence, commitment, the ability to slow time down, even though you're going very quickly in the satellites around you, the planets around your sun are operating in a way that you understand and they don't.
yeah,
And you're seeing a path part. It's like the sea parting before you. And you're like, how come these other people don't see what I see?
yeah,
And I'm sitting there scratching my head going, this is like magic.
yeah.
It is. That is the joy. It
It,
is.
and there's that point where you're in the car when uh, you're you know sort of you're operating on autopilot, but it's not like you're disconnected autopilot. Like you're engaged in it. And there's the subtle little things that you are consciously aware of. Things like, it's that how much slip do I have in the tire right now? Going through this corner, and if I turn the wheel a little bit more, what's the car do? How does it respond? What do I hear in the tire sound or the engine note? What do I feel there? And you're feeling all these senses, all this kind of feedback and everything, and you're taking it all in, and it's kind of like your conscious is just like a sponge soaking it up and then feeding it down inside your brain and say, brain, go to it. And then you're at the same time as you're talking about it's that you're aware of everything else that's going on around you and you're planning out all those moves and everything. And but when you're at that point with the car and it's just it's like you can make the car do whatever you want, and every now and then it doesn't, but that's another clue. Like you
That's right.
tried that and it's like, oh, okay, I learned that. And
Okay. File that away.
yeah,
File
yeah,
that away. Yeah.
yeah. Because there may be a time where you want that or you want more of that or less of that or whatever, but you're using all that stuff. And maybe that's it. It's the as you're driving, you're learning, and you're learning that
Yes.
that does that, this does this doesn't do that. Like it's all of that, and you're blending it all together. And yeah, it does help, I think, if you get a result out of it. It does
It
make you
does.
feel better. Whether it's the $3 plastic trophy, but really it's at the end of the day, you sit back and you go, did that. That was fun. That was cool.
And
That,
that's exactly
that's
how I
joy.
feel. That is joy. And that is exactly how I feel. I mean, people sit there and they say, are you racing to win? And I said, no, I'm winning because I'm racing well, you
Mm,
know? I
mm,
mean,
that's neat.
the racing is the natural end result. Or the win is the natural end result of doing it really, really well. And I think this is a lesson that a lot of people could learn. Everyone is so focused on lap times. And we talk about this all the time. We say lap times are the sum total of dozens of decisions and executions you make in the car over the course of the lap. If you improve the quality of those decisions and that execution, you'll go quicker.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about my racing season this year is it can't go anywhere except down for me.
So do you fear that?
No, no. And the reason why I
That's
don't is because guess what? I've done it.
yeah,
I have I have been able to put all the pieces together. Not once, not twice, but over 4 weekends, 10 times.
yeah.
And so I am not afraid of falling off the cliff or falling off the precipice. I'm not going to forget, and you're not going to forget what made the magic. We're just going to learn more ways to make the magic.
Ooh, that is good. That is good. And I'm going to say that it can't be a coincidence that you and I have both had more joy in our driving uh, kicked off this year for us. For whatever reason, it just seems like every time we have talked this year, it's been less about, what are we doing? What did that? Man, did I have fun doing this? So this has been a good year that way for us.
It really has. It has. And I think, you and I have had a lot of fun with this, you more than me. But sharing this information with other people and observing other people, working with other people, cajoling people, begging people, pushing people, prodding people is one thing. Doing all that to ourselves has become a new pastime and amusement for me. I like pushing myself. I don't know if I've ever liked pushing myself on the racetrack as much as I like doing that now. And
It,
maybe it's because I'm more convinced that there will be a successful outcome. There's less question in my mind that there won't be a
yeah,
successful outcome.
yeah. And maybe, well, I'm going to say for me personally, the joy that I have driving spills over into the joy that I have coaching. And it's not like it's not like coaching has taken away joy from driving through the years, and now I've got it back in driving, so I'm taking it away from coaching. No, I actually think it's benefiting both. It's just brought, I don't know. I hate using the word passion because it sounds so but the why we started this thing in the first place, to have fun, to have joy, to have
Make
passion, to what all those kind of stuff. So, um, yeah,
well, we have been so fortunate because you and I have been fortunate enough to make a living
yeah,
doing our passion more than most folks, I think. And it's not a competition. I understand that. It is my competition and your competition with yourself.
yeah,
And we have won that race.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's been a fun conversation, Peter, as all our conversations are, but this has been a very fun one. So, um, yeah, joy to the racing world. That's a cool thought for the year.
That is a cool thought for the year, and it's very apt for both you and I because
Yeah,
I think we felt it, and we definitely wanted to share that, and that's why one of the reasons why this conversation was important to us
yeah.
to have.
Well, let's keep having fun.